Hi everybody. There were enough questions on the answers for Lab 4, which is just kind of all about dissecting spatial data, that I want to walk through the lab and just kind of demonstrate the different pieces and kind of talk about the nuances of the different data sets and coordinate systems. So I'm just going to start at the beginning of the lab and kind of walk through it. And the first thing I do is ask a bunch of questions about data. And the first one, besides spatial data, is what is a raster? And I just want to show you guys in the properties for any data set, you can go in and actually find out what kind of data it is. So this will tell you it's a raster. Here in the data source, it tells you it's a raster. Those are the obvious ways of finding out. You can also, if you have a raster, you can zoom in and typically see the actual cell sizes or see the actual cells. So grabbing the zoom in tool, just kind of zooming into a place where there's a lot of change, you can see that it's a continuous surface. These should be square. It's because I'm displaying this in a coordinate system where they're not being treated as squares, so don't worry about that. But this is a demonstration that this is continuous, a matrix of continuous spatial data. A shapefile, on the other hand, if we go into the properties of any one of these, points, lines, and polygons, and look at the properties again. Right at the top, the data source tells us it's a shapefile feature class. It's type polygon, so there's different geometry types, point, line, and polygon, and that will be demonstrated for us here. So those are set up a little bit differently between. Typically, the symbology here will also demonstrate that it's a point, line, polygon, and then the stretched color ramp generally is for a raster. These guys, this is an image, so the bands, the color bands equal a color image, and in this case this is also a raster, and you'd tell that from looking at the properties. A feature class is the same thing. We call a feature class, shape files like points, lines, and polygons are generally called a feature class when they're stored in a Geo Database, which is just another file storage type. The terms are interchangeable between shapefile and feature class for the most part, but like I said, feature class is specific to a Geo Database, but it is just basically points, lines, and polygons. So the difference between a layer and a layer file, if I were to take my states US, let me zoom out to this, and apply unique symbology to it, let's just say we go in and categorically represent these by state name. And then we want to save this because that took us a really long time and we don't want to do it again, or we're saving something, I'm being sarcastic, but it typically would be symbology that you want to save. If you're sharing the data with a group or a network and you want everybody using the same symbology, or if the symbology has a custom meaning, like you've worked to classify on a divergent field and you've applied a special color ramp or a custom color ramp to it, you would save that by right-clicking and save it as a layer file. Now what this does is, let me see where I've saved this other data. Hang on, I'm going to navigate. Okay, all I did is navigate to the folder and then saved it, but this is what I want to show you. In Windows Explorer, then this is the data folder that I gave you. And, oh, I did census blocks instead of the state US layer. Okay, sorry about that. What I should have done was the census blocks, but what I want to show you is that a shapefile is built of a bunch of different shape with different file extensions. So this guy, see, they all have the same beginning. This is the geometry. This is a temporary file because it's open. The lock file is because it's open in ArcMap right now. This is the XML version of the geometry. But the rest of these are index files. I can't remember what an SBN file is. This is the projection for the data, so this is where the coordinate system is saved, and this is the database file, so these are the attributes. The whole thing together comprises one shapefile in ArcGIS. The census blocks would be the same thing as this data set right here. And what I was trying to demonstrate is I saved the states US as a layer file, and all that creates is this thing. It draws the geometry. And don't get confused, pretend that I saved the census blocks as a layer file. I don't want to start all over. But basically, this thing is just the symbology for this shapefile. So this geometry is feeding what this would draw with. but it needs the rest of this to display properly. So yeah, that was a little bit more confusing than it needed to be, but hopefully you understand that the shapefile is where the geometry, the attributes, the projection are all drawn from. You can save any changes to the symbology to a layer file. Okay, and that's the exact reason why an MXD document or this map project can be a very small file size, because none of these layers are actually saved in the map document. ARC doesn't make a copy of everything you add and put it, like save it inside this document. It just has a pointer. So again, if we go back to the properties, in the properties, it'll say this is where this data set is located. So I clicked on States US, and it's saying that it's on the G drive in my classes 2016-2017 folder, etc., etc. So this is where this data set is stored. It's not stored in the map document. So the map document might have a file size of, you know, a few hundred kilobytes, but the data being displayed in it might be, you know, a gigabyte of data if it's a lot of big stuff. So that's important when you're saving your map doc. It's why you can't submit an MXD document to me in Canvas, because unless you bring all the data with it, I can't see anything in the map. And then a Geo Database. A Geo Database, I kind of alluded to this already. We can create Geo Databases by just right-clicking, New, and you can't see this. Let me move this over. Okay, catalog. Just on any folder that you want to create one in, you can say New Geo Database. This is the icon for it. It's different than a folder, and it has different properties. You can't copy and paste data or drag and drop data into a Geo Database. You have to import and export information out of it. So here's one that says St. Helena. Here's the new one we just made, the new file Geo Database. It doesn't have anything in it right now, but if I want to import something into it, I right-click and hit the import button. I can import a feature data set, a feature class, and this would allow me to go and find the data to import into it. Let's see here. Anyway, it does have some nice features.